I returned home after shoulder replacement surgery to find my wife Amelia dying in our Boston mansion. Meanwhile, our son Ethan was posting beach photos from Hawaii with the caption, "Finally free from these pathetic old folks." But when I started investigating what really happened during those 4 days, I was in the hospital. I discovered something that changed everything I thought I knew about my son. What I found wasn't just neglect. It was calculated betrayal. I grabbed my phone and made one call. 20 minutes later, everything changed forever. Before we continue with what I discovered that day, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe. The betrayal I'm about to reveal will shock you to your core. My shoulder burned where they had sliced through muscle and tendon just 4 days ago. Doctor Hawthorne had warned me the recovery would be brutal, but standing here fumbling with my own front door key, I understood what brutal really meant. The simple act of turning metal in a lock took more effort than it should have, my right arm hanging useless as dead weight. The door finally gave way, swinging inward to reveal darkness. No lights, no television murmur, no gentle hum of Amelia's medical equipment. Just the kind of silence that makes your skin prickle with dread. I stepped across the threshold, pausing to let my eyes adjust. Something felt wrong in a way I couldn't name yet. Our Boston home usually breathed with life, but now it felt hollow, abandoned. The grandfather clock I'd restored had stopped ticking. Even the air tasted stale, like a house that had been holding its breath for days. "Amelia!" My voice bounced off the hardwood floors with an echo that shouldn't exist in a furnished room. The living room curtains were drawn against the February afternoon sun, and mail lay scattered across our antique table like evidence of neglect. My architect's eye cataloged the details: automatically displaced furniture, overturned magazines, the wheelchair that should have been beside our bed, sitting abandoned in the corner. I moved through the house with growing alarm, my left hand trailing the wall for balance. 45 years of marriage teaches you to read the signs, and every sign screamed abandonment. The bedroom door stood slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and the smell hit me. First, stale sweat, unwashed sheets, and something else, something human and desperate. She lay in our bed like a broken bird, sheets twisted around her legs, head turned toward the window where afternoon light tried to penetrate the heavy drapes. Her lips had that cracked, papery look of severe dehydration. The water pitcher I had specifically positioned within arm's reach before leaving for surgery lay bone dry and overturned. "Amelia!" Her name came out as barely more than breath. Her eyes opened slowly, like it cost her something precious. Recognition flickered, then something that looked like relief mixed with shame. "Theodore," she whispered, "you're back." I crossed the room, forgetting my shoulder, forgetting everything except the way she looked. Diminished, fragile, wrong. My wife of 45 years. The woman who'd stood beside me through every architectural triumph and failure. Reduced to this. Where's Ethan? Though part of me already knew. 4 days, she breathed. He promised he'd come back. Said he needed a break. Had earned it. Her voice cracked like old parchment. I couldn't reach the water. Couldn't get to my wheelchair. The math assembled itself in my head with architectural precision. Tuesday morning, he'd left. Wednesday, I'd gone under the knife. Today was Saturday. 4 days of abandonment. While I trusted him with the most precious thing in my world, I called 911 with hands that stayed steady through sheer force of will. The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional, asking for our address in Beacon Street's historic district. The paramedics arrived in 19 minutes. Two women who moved with practiced efficiency, checking vitals while asking the questions that mattered. How long without fluids? Any medical conditions? Where was her primary caregiver? My son, I said, the words tasting like ash. He was supposed to be here. After they wheeled her away, I stood in the empty bedroom, surveying the evidence with a contractor's eye for detail. Medication bottles lined up but unopened, a glass positioned just out of reach, the wheelchair deliberately distant from the bed. That's when I remembered Ethan's weakness, his compulsive need to broadcast every moment of his life. I pulled out my phone, opened Instagram, and typed his name. The page loaded like a slow-motion nightmare. Turquoise water, a cocktail glass sweating in tropical heat, Ethan's face grinning and carefree, sunglasses pushed up on his forehead. The location tag read, Hawaii, posted 3 hours ago. The caption stopped my heart. Finally free from these pathetic old folks. Island life, living my best life. I stared at those words until they burned themselves into my memory. Then I grabbed my phone with the cold precision that had built my career. The first call I was about to make would change everything forever. The sterile hospital smell clung to my clothes as I sat beside Amelia's bed. Watching the steady drip of IV fluids into her dehydrated body. Sunday morning light filtered through the ICU windows, but it felt like we were trapped in some medical purgatory. Her eyes were clearer now, though still sunken in her pale face. "Don't be too hard on the boy," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the beeping monitors. Even after everything, she was protecting him. "Doctor!" Ellis appeared at the foot of her bed, clipboard in hand, his expression grim. "Mr. Harper, I need you to understand how close we came to losing her. Another day without fluids, and we'd be having a very different conversation. Severe dehydration in MS patients can cause kidney failure, brain damage, even death." The words hit me like physical blows. Another day. My son had left his mother one day away from death. I squeezed Amelia's hand gently. "Rest now, sweetheart. I'll handle everything." Back home, I stood in my study, surrounded by 40 years of architectural achievements awards, blueprints, photographs of buildings I designed, from foundation to rooftop. But today, I was constructing something entirely different. I was building a case. Ethan's room yielded its secrets like a crime scene. Scattered papers, unpaid bills, and then tucked beneath his laptop. Something that made my blood run cold. A life insurance policy, pristine and official, dated 7 weeks ago, $600,000. Beneficiary Ethan Harper. Premium paid in full for 1 year. My hands shook as I read the fine print. The policy was active. No waiting period for accidental death. And the timing. 7 weeks before his sudden need for a break to Hawaii. I called Rebecca Steele immediately. We'd worked together for 25 years on construction contracts and estate planning, but I'd never heard my own voice sound so deadly calm. "Rebecca, I need to see you today." Emergency. Her downtown office on Monday felt like a war room. Rebecca Steele was 55 years of sharp intelligence wrapped in northern steel. The kind of lawyer who could dissect a contract like a surgeon. She listened without interruption as I laid out the evidence, the abandonment, the Hawaii Post, and finally the insurance policy. Jesus. "Theodore," she breathed, studying the document. "This isn't abandonment anymore. This is attempted murder." The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. My son hadn't just neglected his mother. He'd orchestrated her potential death for $600,000. "What are my options?" I asked, my voice steady as granite. Rebecca leaned back in her leather chair, her mind already working. "Trust creation, asset transfer. We can remove him from your will entirely. Transfer everything to a charitable foundation. Make it ironclad, uncontestable." "How long?" 72 hours, if we work through the weekend. "But Theodore, this is permanent. Once we execute these documents, there's no going back." I thought about Amelia lying in that hospital bed, about Ethan's grinning face in those Hawaii photos, about that insurance policy with its cold calculation of my wife's worth. $600,000. That's what her life meant to our son. "I want him removed completely," I said, each word carved from ice. "Everything goes to charity, the house, the investments, every penny. He gambled on his mother's death, and he lost." As I signed the first document, my architect's precision guiding every stroke of the pen, I realized something profound had shifted inside me. Ethan had made his choice long before Hawaii. The moment he'd bought that policy and started counting down the days until his inheritance arrived via his mother's corpse. Now I was making mine. Tuesday morning arrived with the finality of a judge's gavel. The trust documents sat on my desk, seals gleaming like victories. $2.2 million, a lifetime of work, now belonged to the Amelia Harper Memorial Foundation. Every penny of Ethan's inheritance was gone. The notification email went out at 10 a.m. "Asset transfer complete. You have been removed from all inheritance documents." I imagined my son and his wife reading those words on some Hawaiian beach, paradise turning to quicksand beneath their feet. Amelia came home that afternoon with Maria Gonzalez, a competent 50-year-old nurse whose presence immediately warmed our house. "Beautiful home, Mr. Harper. Amelia will be comfortable here." The phone started ringing 24 hours later. 30 missed calls from Ethan. Each ring felt like a small victory. Wednesday evening brought the sound of a taxi in our driveway. $7,800 for 2 last-minute flights from Hawaii. Money they couldn't afford. Spent in panic. The front door burst open, and Ethan stumbled in like a man fleeing fire hair disheveled. Hawaiian tan fading under our foyer lights. Behind him, Sophia dragged 2 suitcases, her designer vacation clothes wrinkled, her usual composure cracked. Dad, we need to talk," Ethan gasped. "There's been some mistake." "You're both back early," I said, voice steady as stone. "Hawaii not agreeing with you. Don't joke. What did you do?" "I made arrangements for my estate. Adults do that." Sophia dropped her suitcase with a thud. "Your estate. That's Ethan's inheritance. You can't just give it all away." "Actually, I did." Her face went pale beneath her fading tan. "You're bluffing. Old people threaten this stuff all the time. But you'd never really. This is because of Mom, isn't it?" Ethan's voice cracked. "She's fine. She's home now." "No thanks to you." The words came out quieter, more dangerous. "You left her to die." "I didn't. It was just a few days. I needed a break. We've been taking care of you people for years. Taking care of us." I pulled out my phone, showed him his Instagram post. "Pathetic old folks. That's what you called us." His face went white. "I didn't mean." Sophia stepped forward, desperation replacing arrogance. "He was just frustrated. You know how social media is. People say things they don't mean. Do they buy life insurance policies they don't mean to? I watched both their faces freeze. $600,000. Ethan, purchased 7 weeks before your sudden need for a Hawaiian vacation. The foyer went dead silent, except for Maria's quiet movements in Amelia's room. How did you? Ethan started, then stopped. Sophia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The insurance policy tells me everything I need to know about your real intentions. The silence that followed my revelation about the insurance policy stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. But instead of leaving, Ethan and Sophia dug in their heels like squatters, claiming territory that was never theirs. "We're not going anywhere," Sophia announced the next morning, standing in my kitchen wearing yesterday's wrinkled clothes. "This is still legally Ethan's home until the courts say otherwise." She was wrong, but I didn't correct her. I had bigger battles ahead. What followed were the most toxic 3 weeks of my life. We moved around each other like hostile ghosts, sharing space but nothing else. Sophia cranked her music until the walls vibrated, left dirty dishes in the sink like territorial markers, tracked mud across Amelia's pristine hardwood floors with deliberate carelessness. Ethan spent hours on the phone with cut-rate lawyers, his voice carrying through thin walls. There has to be something. Undue influence. Diminished capacity. He was on pain medication after surgery. I documented every call, every mess, every act of passive aggression. An architect learns to build cases as carefully as buildings. But it was Amelia who paid the real price. The stress accelerated her MS symptoms like gasoline on fire. Maria pulled me aside after the first week, her professional composure cracking. "Mr. Harper, her vitals are stable, but she's fading. The tension in this house, it's killing her spirit." I spent every possible moment in Amelia's room, reading her architectural journals she used to tease me about. "Still boring after all these years," I'd whisper, hoping for her old smile. But her responses grew weaker each day, her grip on my hand loosening like her hold on life. "Don't let them destroy what we built," she whispered one evening, her voice barely audible above the bass thumping from upstairs. "Never," I promised. Her final words came on a quiet Wednesday morning in early March. No dramatic gasping, no Hollywood death scene. Just Amelia looking at me with eyes that had loved me for 45 years, whispering, "Love you always," before drifting into sleep that became eternal. I sat holding her hand for an hour after she stopped breathing, listening to Sophia's music pounding overhead like a desecration of grief. The funeral was small. By choice, 18 people who actually knew and loved Amelia. Mrs. Thompson from next door brought a casserole, in tears. Maria came in her best dress, holding my arm as we walked to the graveside. Ethan arrived 25 minutes late, reeking of whiskey and desperation. He stumbled toward the front, nearly knocking over the flower arrangement I'd personally selected. "She was my mother," he slurred, grabbing the podium for balance. "The best woman who ever lived. I loved her." The mourners shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs." Thompson's eyes narrowed with disgust. "You left her to die," I said quietly, my voice carrying across the silent cemetery. "Everyone here knows it. You turned her against me. You poisoned." "Leave now," I interrupted, "while you still have some dignity left." 2 of our neighbors gently but firmly escorted him away, Sophia trailing behind with her eyes fixed on the ground. We buried Amelia under the oak trees she'd admired during our Sunday drives. When walking had become too difficult for her, I placed a single white rose on her casket, the same variety I'd given her on our first date 55 years ago. After the last mourner left, I stood alone in the cemetery, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. Grief, yes, but something else too. A crystalline clarity about what came next. The real battle was just beginning. The certified mail receipt felt like a weapon in my hands. March 18th, exactly 3 weeks after we'd buried Amelia. I watched the postal worker hand-deliver the eviction notice to my own front door. Ethan signed for it with shaking fingers, his hangover evident in every movement. He tore open the envelope right there on the porch, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, and finally panic as he read the legal language. Evict me, your own flesh and blood. You made your choice in Hawaii, I said through the screen door. I'm making mine in Boston. He crumpled the notice, threw it at my feet. Where am I supposed to go? We have no money. You had money for Hawaiian vacations. Figure it out. 20 days. That's what Massachusetts law required. 20 days for my son to find somewhere else to destroy his life while I reclaimed the home where his mother had died. He didn't leave. Rebecca filed the eviction lawsuit on April 2nd with the methodical precision of a surgeon, every document perfect, every precedent cited, every loophole sealed. We'd worked together long enough for me to appreciate her craftsmanship. The Boston County Courthouse felt like a cathedral of justice. On April 18th, Judge Harlan, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, reviewed our case with the efficiency of someone who'd seen every family drama twice. Rebecca presented our evidence like building a foundation, certified mail receipts, timeline documentation, witness statements from Mrs. Thompson and Maria, no lease agreement, no rent payments, no legal right to occupancy. Ethan's lawyer, a kid fresh from law school who probably worked for grocery money, tried the sympathy angle. Your Honor, this is a family dispute, not a landlord-tenant issue. My client has nowhere else to go. Judge Harlan barely looked up from the documents. Mr. Harper has legal right to his property. Family relationships don't supersede property law. Her gavel came down like a period at the end of a sentence. Ethan Harper must vacate the premises by May 18th. Next case. But Ethan wasn't finished fighting. April 25th brought us back to court for his desperate counterattack. A different courtroom. A different Judge Patterson. This time older and more formal. The kind of man who'd heard every excuse in the book. Ethan's claim was pathetic, but predictable mental incompetence due to post-surgical medication. His lawyer presented it like a Hail Mary pass, with seconds left on the clock. Rebecca demolished it with surgical precision. Medical records showing I'd only taken over-the-counter pain relievers. Doctor. Hawthorne's sworn affidavit stating the shoulder surgery required only local anesthetic with no cognitive side effects. Security footage from her office building showing me articulate and purposeful during our meetings. Mr. Harper understood every clause, asked specific questions, made deliberate choices. She told the court, this is textbook competency. The kid lawyer tried one more time. But, Your Honor, he was only 5 days post-surgery. A minor orthopedic procedure. Rebecca interrupted. Not brain surgery. His mind was perfectly clear. Judge Patterson reviewed everything with the thoroughness of a man who understood that his decisions became permanent records. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute finality. This court finds no credible evidence of diminished capacity. The medical testimony is clear. The video evidence shows Mr. Harper articulate and purposeful in his decision-making. He fixed Ethan with a stare that could have frozen lava. Claim dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Ethan Harper is barred from refiling this claim. Ethan's head dropped into his hands. I heard something between a sob and a gasp, the sound of a man watching his last hope die in a courtroom. Every legal avenue was now closed. The private investigator's report arrived Thursday morning, 9 pages documenting how my son had gambled away a house like pocket change. Ethan had lost the Providence property to Alexander Brooks in poker 7 months ago, betting everything on a pair of nines against a full house. Except the transfer wasn't legal. I spent the morning reviewing the original deed from 6 years ago, when I'd foolishly given Ethan that house. There it was in Section 5, Clause C, a restriction. I'd forgotten. No transfers for 12 years without my written consent. Alexander Brooks had been playing with house money that was never legally his. The drive to Providence took 50 minutes. Alexander's house was impressive Mediterranean style with expensive cars that spoke of successful business. He answered the door himself, a solid man in his 50s with intelligent eyes and a meaningful handshake. Mr. Brooks, I'm Theodore Harper. I believe you won a house for my son in a poker game. He nodded toward his kitchen. Coffee and yes, your son's a terrible poker player. Worst I've seen in 25 years. He's terrible at a lot of things. Poker's just one of them. Alexander poured coffee, movements deliberate. I'm guessing you're not here for sympathy. I'm here to buy the house back. It's not for sale. Good rental income. $1,400 a month from tenants. I placed the deed on his granite countertop. When I gave that house to Ethan, there was a deed restriction. No transfers without my consent. Alexander's jaw tightened as he read. The silence stretched while he processed what this meant. You're saying I don't legally own it. I'm saying you're holding property you don't legally possess, which makes this conversation important for both of us. He calculated like the professional gambler he was. If that's true, why offer to buy it? Just take it back through courts. Litigation takes time, costs money, creates bad blood. I'm offering a clean exit. $520,000. I paid more. Ethan's debt was $550 plus interest. Ethan's debt isn't my problem. Market value is $550. I'm offering $520. That's $30,000 under value, but $30,000 more than you'll get in court. He studied me with new respect. You've got steel, old man. Your son bet everything on nothing. This is the last mess I'll clean up for him. We shook hands. Two professionals who understood business, even when it grew from someone else's stupidity. 3-week closing. My lawyer will contact yours. I drove back to Boston, owning both houses, the one I'd built and the one I'd recovered. Ethan would never know what I'd reclaimed from his failures. The sheriff's deputies arrived at exactly 10 a.m. on May 18th. Clipboard efficiency, wrapped in polite northern courtesy. I watched from my study window as they supervised Ethan loading his possessions into a rented U-Haul truck that probably cost more than he could afford. 40 days, one deputy explained, though we all knew the legal battle was over. You've got 40 days to find permanent housing. Ethan found a 1-bedroom apartment in Newport, 50 minutes north of Boston, in the kind of neighborhood where dreams go to die. $1,300 a month for thin walls, cheap carpet, and the constant soundtrack of other people's failures bleeding through inadequate insulation. Sophia took a job at a department store. $14 an hour, folding clothes and forcing smiles at customers who treated her like furniture. I knew because Mrs. Thompson's network of neighborhood gossips extended surprisingly far, and information flowed back to me like water finding its level. Ethan became an Amazon delivery driver. $17 an hour. Racing against impossible schedules to drop packages at strangers' doors. The irony wasn't lost on me, my son, who'd once expected to inherit nearly $2.5 million, now counting pennies for rent money. but it was the letter I sent in early July that pushed him over the edge. Filial responsibility statutes exist in most states, legal relics from an era when families actually took care of each other. The letter, drafted by Rebecca with surgical precision, demanded $52,000 in medical costs, Amelia's hospital bills, Maria's wages, medications, equipment, every receipt itemized like a construction invoice. Failure to respond within 40 days will result in legal action, the letter concluded. Though I had no intention of pursuing it, the threat was the weapon, not the action. Ethan's panic was immediate and predictable. He called every legal aid hotline in Massachusetts, begging for free consultations that all delivered the same crushing message. The statute exists. Application depends on circumstances. You need representation you can't afford. The calls came at all hours, Ethan pacing his thin-walled apartment, voice carrying to neighbors who probably had their own problems. Mrs. Thompson's sources reported everything: the desperate phone calls, the sleepless nights, the growing tension between him and Sophia. "I can't do this anymore," Sophia finally told him on a Thursday evening in early July. The argument was loud enough for the whole complex to hear. "This is your family, your mess. I didn't sign up to be poor." She moved out on July 12th, taking everything that was hers and half of what wasn't. The divorce papers arrived 3 days later, no-fault dissolution. No assets to divide. No children to complicate things. Clean and simple, like cutting off a gangrenous limb. Ethan signed without contest. What was the point of fighting for nothing? The decree became final 3 weeks later, processed through family court with the same efficiency that had handled his eviction. Sophia disappeared into whatever life she could build without the anchor of his failures dragging her down. Mrs. Thompson's final report painted a picture of complete isolation, Ethan alone in his apartment, working delivery routes that barely covered rent, eating ramen noodles and generic cereal, watching his phone for calls that never came. He'd gained exactly what his choices had earned him: the perfect solitude of consequences fully realized. The real estate closing felt like the final page of a long, painful chapter. Mid-July brought 2 separate transactions. The Boston mansion sold for $720,000. The recovered Providence house for $380,000. Combined with my existing savings, the total reached $1.4 million. More money than I'd ever imagined having. More than enough to build something lasting. The Chesapeake Bay condo was everything Boston wasn't: modern, simple, peaceful. 3 bedrooms overlooking water that changed color with the sky. A small balcony where I could grow herbs and watch pelicans dive for fish. It cost me $280,000, leaving over $1 million for the work that really mattered. The Amelia Harper Memorial Foundation took shape like the most important architectural project of my career. Articles of incorporation, 501c3 status, a board of directors who understood that multiple sclerosis families needed more than sympathy. They needed practical help. Maria agreed to serve on the board, bringing her nursing expertise. Mrs. Thompson surprised me by volunteering her organizational skills. Dr. Ellis, who'd treated Amelia in the ICU, joined as our medical advisor. "This is exactly what the MS community needs," he told me during our first board meeting. "In-home nursing support makes the difference between managing at home and institutional placement." September 1st arrived with Maryland sunshine and the kind of clarity that makes everything feel possible. The foundation launch ceremony filled a downtown conference room with 50 people who understood what we were trying to accomplish. Local Gazette reporter Emily Park took notes while I explained our mission. The Amelia Harper Memorial Foundation will provide $18,000 grants to families dealing with multiple sclerosis, specifically for in-home nursing assistance. These aren't loans. They're investments in human dignity. The first 4 grants went to families who'd been struggling exactly as Amelia and I had struggled. The Johnsons from Annapolis, where Lisa Johnson's MS had progressed to the point where her husband couldn't manage her care alone. The Ramirez family from Rockville, whose insurance covered medical equipment, but not the nursing help that made it useful. The Davis family from Bowie, where teenage children were trying to care for their mother while finishing high school. $18,000 each, enough for 7 months of professional nursing care, the bridge between crisis and stability. Mrs. Thompson posted photos from the ceremony on Facebook, tagging the foundation and adding details about Amelia's story, the devoted wife, the difficult illness, the husband who'd honored her memory by helping others. "Beautiful ceremony today," she wrote. Theodore Harper turning his grief into hope for other families. "This is what love looks like after loss." The post reached nearly 3,000 people in the Boston area, including someone I hadn't expected. Later that evening, Mrs. Thompson called with news from her network. "Ethan saw the Facebook post. My neighbor's daughter lives in the same complex. She heard him on the phone with someone, crying about the foundation. Said he finally understood what he'd lost. I stood on my balcony watching the sunset paint Chesapeake Bay in shades of gold and orange, thinking about understanding that comes too late to matter. Ethan was in Newport, delivering packages to strangers, living in a 1-bedroom apartment that cost more than he could afford, finally grasping the full accounting of his choices. He'd traded his mother's life for a Hawaiian vacation and lost everything inheritance: wife, father, future. Meanwhile, Amelia's name would help families for decades. Board members committed, funding secure, mission clear. That legacy mattered more than any revenge. Late September evenings in Maryland carry a special kind of peace. I sat on my condo balcony watching the sun paint the bay in shades of gold and amber, a cup of coffee cooling in my hands, while herb plants thrived in their small pots along the railing. Amelia's wedding photo sat on the side table beside me. Young faces full of hope and dreams we'd mostly achieved. 45 years of marriage reduced to memories, and a foundation that would outlive us both. The foundation was secure now. Board members committed for the long term, funding stable, mission clear. Families would receive help for decades. Long after I was gone, that continuity felt more satisfying than any architectural project I'd ever completed. Somewhere 50 miles north, Ethan was finishing another delivery route, counting tips that barely covered rent on an apartment with walls thin enough to hear his neighbors' lives continuing around him. Alone with the consequences of choices he'd made when he thought other people's lives were disposable. The arithmetic was simple and final. He'd lost his inheritance, his house, his wife, his father, gained exactly what his selfishness had earned him: perfect isolation in a world that didn't care about his problems. I'd built that isolation as carefully as any structure, foundation to rooftop, ensuring it would last. But sitting here in the gathering twilight, I realized something had shifted inside me over these months. The cold fury that had driven my revenge had transformed into something warmer, more purposeful. The foundation wasn't just punishment disguised as charity. It was genuine hope built from genuine loss. Mrs. Thompson had called earlier with her usual neighborhood intelligence. "Ethan tried calling you today, 4 times. Hung up each time before it went to voicemail." I hadn't felt the urge to answer. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ash. The difference between us had never been intelligence or opportunity. I'd had plenty of both, and so had he. The difference was understanding that actions carry weight, that choices echo forward through generations, that family means more than shared DNA. Family means showing up when someone needs you, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. Ethan had never learned that lesson. Maybe he never could. I'd stopped trying to teach him and started living it myself, helping families who understood what he'd never grasped, that caring for someone isn't a burden to escape from, but a privilege to embrace. The bay darkened as stars appeared, and I stood to go inside. Tomorrow would bring more grant applications, more families needing help, more opportunities to transform loss into purpose. Ethan would wake up in his cheap apartment, deliver packages to strangers, and go to sleep alone with his choices. That was justice enough. As for me, I'd found something better than revenge. I'd found peace in the knowledge that Amelia's suffering had meaning, that her name would help others, that love could survive even the worst betrayals if you knew how to transform it. The difference between revenge and justice, I'd learned, is what you build from the ashes. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did to Ethan. The answer is simple. I don't regret seeking justice, but I've learned that God works in ways we don't always understand immediately. What started as a father's fury became something deeper, a lesson about what family truly means. You see, these grandpa stories aren't just entertainment. They're warnings. Wisdom passed down through generations who've learned hard truths. This true story taught me that blood doesn't make you family. Showing up does. Being there when someone needs you, especially when it's difficult. That's what separates real family from people who just share your DNA. Ethan thought caring for his mother was a burden. He saw her MS as an inconvenience to his freedom. But God teaches us through Scripture that honoring our parents isn't optional. It's fundamental to who we are as human beings. When we abandon that responsibility, we don't just hurt them, we destroy something essential in ourselves. The insurance policy revealed his true heart. He wasn't just neglecting Amelia, he was counting on her death. That's when I understood this wasn't about a son making mistakes. It was about a man who'd lost his soul somewhere along the way. These grandpa stories matter because they remind us that our choices have consequences that ripple through generations. This true story shows what happens when we forget that family isn't about what we can get, but what we're willing to give. God blessed me with the resources to seek justice. But more importantly, He showed me how to transform pain into purpose. The foundation continues Amelia's legacy, helping families who understand what Ethan never learned. Every grant we award is proof that love can survive betrayal, that good can emerge from evil, and that God can use even our darkest moments to create light for others. That's the real lesson in these grandpa stories. Not that revenge is sweet, but that justice served with purpose can heal wounds we thought would never stop bleeding. If this true story touched your heart, or reminded you of your own family responsibilities, I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to make difficult choices about caring for aging parents? Your experience might help someone else facing the same struggles. And if these grandpa stories resonate with you, please subscribe to our channel and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come wrapped in the most painful truths.